G'day everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of the AustrAlien Podcast. As always, I am your host, TJ Hollis, and with me is the one true voice of the people, Mr. Sean Mills. How you doing, buddy? What's the poop?
Mate, I'm doing great, what's the poop? Well, I've just spent half an hour listening to Scott Morrison talk about the budget, being budget night today, so I'm ready to talk about something else.
That's fair enough. Well, I suggest that perhaps we leave that for a future episode where we can cut it up and talk about it in detail.
Yeah, I think so. Sounds good.
Worry not, listeners. We have plenty of other Australian politics to discuss. The first one I want to start with, Cory Bernardi. This is going to throw back to a few episodes ago where we were discussing Cory Bernardi leaving the Liberal Party to start his own Australian Conservative Party in South Australia, and it seems that they are getting a bit of a boost in the fact that the Family First Party in South Australia will be shutting doors, and most of the members of the Family First Party outside of Senator Lucy Gachui will be joining Bernardi's Australian Conservative Party.
Correct. A merger of political parties. We haven't seen that in a long time in Australia, so yeah. What do you think of that?
I think it's interesting. Like, I think it certainly goes against my bets that I placed on how long the Australian Conservative Party might last, because I didn't think they would last more than a year or two. I certainly didn't think that they would get any sort of elected officials that weren't named Cory Bernardi in the next elections. And I think it's very interesting that the new party is absorbing the standing party that has more name recognition.
Yeah. I actually am not surprised at that. Two reasons. First of all, Family First has always been, and we've talked about this before, Family First has always been, had the millstone around its neck of being linked to one particular denomination, one particular Christian denomination. So, or at least in the wider community as being a Christian party. So, that's always hampered their growth in the secular circles. Outside of the Christian circles, that's always hampered their growth. Secondly, they've had a lot of former Senator Bob Day. He was the major financial backer of the party from all reports. And when his construction business went bust, he declared bankruptcy and had to pull out of Parliament. And then subsequently, the Court of Disputed Returns, or the High Court or whatever, has subsequently decided that he shouldn't have been there in the first place. He wasn't eligible to be elected based on running an insolvent company or something along those lines. I'm not 100% sure on the details there, but basically Day was out and the new senator was in. Which, as a side note, very interesting. Our first African-Australian Member of Parliament, sitting as an independent, decided not to sit with the new merged party, but I suppose we can't fault her for that. Or we can, depends on which side of the politics you're on. So, look, I think it's interesting because I think that they are going to, as we said before, the Australian Conservatives, that's a very good name for the party. It's kept a person's name out of it, which I think has hampered things like Katter and One Nation. And I think that, you know what they are. They call themselves the Australian Conservatives. There's no ambiguity in the name. When you look at the Liberal Party of Australia, they're not really Liberals. So, in the true sense of the word. So, the Australian Conservatives have that going for them. Most of those Family First people would fit into that sort of general ideology anyway. They like the fact that Bernardi's Catholic, so he has very, what do they call it, traditional family values, the same as Family First. I think it's a absolute masterstroke from Bernardi.
Absolutely.
From his side of view, his point of view, because it gives him a branch set up. And you don't usually see this in politics. You think of politicians as the party. The Liberals are, Malcolm Turnbull and Tony Abbott and, Scott Morrison, etc., etc. But behind those people are the local branches, and like in our electorate of Capricornia, there might be 20 branches of the LNP or Liberal Party or whatever. And those are just average people who've joined the party and helped to make the decisions and build the platform, etc., etc. Bernardi didn't have that setup. He didn't have that structure when he pulled out of the Liberal Party and started his own party. He didn't have any of that branch structure. Family First have been there for a decade or more. They've got that structure. It might be a bit loose in places, but at least there's some structure there. So that is really going to help him on election day. At least they've got lists of people that they can ring and say, can you hand out how to vote cards for us? Or can you help us put up cornflutes in your garden? Or help them select candidates for seats and stuff like that. So that party structure of of Family First, is going to really, really help.
Absolutely. I mean, the infrastructure alone is just such a huge leg up for him.
Yeah.
To have all of that in place that he can now turn around and not focus on having to build or having to pay for himself.
Yes, correct. Yeah, absolutely. They are... I subscribe to their newsletter because I like to keep abreast of these things, and they are the fastest growing political party in Australia. I don't know if that's because they're the only one who are growing, but actually I found an interesting parallel. You'll like this because you're a bit of a history buff like myself, amateur historians. The history of the Liberal Party in Australia goes back to the 1940s, and before the Liberal Party there was a party called the United Australia Party, and that party was what Bob Menzies and those people of that era were in. That sort of came to a point where that sort of fell apart a bit, and what Menzies did, sort of from the end of the Second World War until 1949 when they won government, was he took the core of the United Australia Party and got a lot of those little fringe conservative groups and merged them all into what became the Liberal Party of Australia. So in 1949, when they ran as the Liberal Party, it was actually an amalgamation of all of these smaller parties, plus sort of the bulk of the United Australia Party, which was the politicians. And I find it interesting, just the parallel between that and what Bernardi's doing there. If he pulls in a couple more of these fringe parties, it's, they could possibly be a third force in Australian politics.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting to see just how believable that could be.
Yeah. We haven't had a big reorganisation of our political spectrum since, I don't know, probably that time, probably the 40s when the Liberal Party was formed out of all the various conservative pockets of groups of people, whereas, maybe the 70s when Don Chipp left and formed the Australian Democrats. But so it's been a long time. The Second World War was close on 70 years ago, so that's a long time to have very stable political parties. Is there a possibility, you've got some other of those fringe parties like Australian Liberty Alliance and Katter Australia Party, One Nation, maybe the Lib Dems, anyway, a few of those fringe parties that get, 2, 3, 4, 5% of the vote but are never a threat to the majors. What if 2 or 3 of those more merge into a conservative party? Do you then have the National Party? What if it's only in Queensland that we're the Libs and the Nats are one party. What if the National Party merged into a Conservative Party? Not many differences in their beliefs.
That's a really good question.
I mean, I don't think the Nationals would. They're proud of their heritage. They're the oldest party in Australia, to be honest. They're actually older than the Australian Labor Party. What if 2 or 3 of these other little ones join in and suddenly, with the help of the Nationals, they could form coalition?
What if the National Party split off from the Liberals?
Mm.
And then incorporated a few groups such as the Katter Party and One Nation.
Well, see, there's the other thing, could that happen? You got to think One Nation particularly, a lot of their core in Queensland and Western Australia where their strength is do come from national traditional country party heartland. So it's interesting. I think good on him, good on Bernardi for that coup. I think it's a major thing, and on a personal level, I'm happy to see the back of Family First as a party. I've never liked them.
Absolutely.
I don't like one-issue parties, and, I think we've talked about this before. They're a one-issue party. Let's put the family at the centre of things. And while that's good in its own way, there's nothing wrong with that.
There is something wrong with it in the fact that it's what one group of people considered the family, and that's the problem. It was never an inclusive concept of family. It was, this is what we, with our religious beliefs, believe a family is, and any deviation from that is not family, and therefore something to be attacked and fought against. And that's the problem. For me personally, that was the problem with them. Because they weren't about to be honest, they weren't about family. They were about Christian core ideology, or at least their version of Christian core ideology. And,
even if they weren't, that was how they're perceived. Because, we could go into some detail, we could go into some discussion, which, we won't for, lack of time, but, we could go into discussion where they don't side with conservative Christian values whatsoever, whereas they did vote, different ways. Was it Stephen Fielding and stuff before Bob Day was there? But I just, and perception is everything in politics, and that's all that matters. So getting rid of Family First, getting rid of all the baggage that had, but keeping the core foundations of it, I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
And here's the question for the Australian Conservative Party now, is will they be able to to make the public believe that they are not a Christian-backed party?
I think the name does.
Can they, in the public's eye, I mean, the name in itself is a good step. I absolutely agree. But will they be able to keep it in the public's eye to believe that they are a conservative party and not a religious party? Because conservatism doesn't necessarily mean religion.
No,
it doesn't necessarily mean Christianity.
Well, I guess we can only wait and see on that point. I think they can, because I don't feel that they've been tarred with it straight away. And even watching the media coverage in the week or so since that's been announced, since the merger's been announced, I don't feel that you could hear it in the background of news articles and stuff that that Family First were a church-based party. They're a church-based party. They're a church-based party. So, and I haven't heard that thrown at Bernardi, at Australian Conservatives yet. So
yet. And that's my question: is
let's be
how
honest,
long is it going to take?
The next election, if we're going to be honest, the Greens will use that, because the Greens aren't threatened by. They're not a threat really to the two majors, but their status as a solid number 3 in Australian politics could be.
Oh, that is absolutely up. That is absolutely up for grabs right now.
That's up for grabs. There's a conservative wind blowing across the world. The next election is going
to see. Yeah. But in saying that conservative wind is already starting to see. It's already starting to peter out in the polls. I mean, you look at France, where
France.
What was that?
I don't think you can judge France in the same way that you judge the other Western countries, because they're French.
Well, it's not just France. It's not just France. I mean, for those who don't know, there was basically the Pauline Hanson of France was up for the top job, and she got decimated in their elections.
Yep, 60-40. It was 60-40 the vote, so that's a pretty convincing win by the young fella, 39-year-old.
Absolutely.
Can't think of his name, but the new president of France.
Yep, and in the Netherlands, Geert Wilders' party got kicked pretty hard.
Yep, that's true too. Yeah. Well, yes and no. They still made gains on what they had, though.
They still made gains on what they had, but it was still nothing compared to what they were expecting.
Yeah.
To what anybody was expecting in the Netherlands.
Well.
It was nothing compared to what they'd been touting and screaming they were going to get. It was nothing compared to what they were telling the world, this is what the people of the Netherlands want.
Yep. Hey, look, I think it just goes to prove that polling is rubbish, because I don't think there's been a poll that's come out internationally for a long time now that's been even close to accurate. You know, they said David Cameron in the UK was going to lose, or at least end up with the same hung parliament that he had last time, and he convincingly won in his own right. Trump was never going to win. He was never going to get nominated, then he was never going to get through the election, then he was never going to win. He was never going to last 100 days, you know, and he's still there. God help us. You know, the coalition in Australia weren't going to win the last election, and they won. You know, they barely, but they still won. So, polling, it's rubbish. Yeah, Brexit was going to fail.
The problem with polling is they extrapolate from, you know, groups of, say, 2,000-3,000 people, but
for a good poll,
they only ever get answers from the sort of people who want to take part in polls.
Yep.
And a lot of the time, that's either people with a vested interest in one particular political side,
yep,
or it's the sort of people that have the time. Because these polls happen generally while most people are at work during the day. And polls are also, well, like I said, there's only a certain sort of person who actually takes part in a poll when they're called.
Yeah.
Or when they're stopped in the supermarkets or whatever like that. You know, you're not getting a good cross-section of the community.
Well, here's an interesting point in Australian polling. Up until recently, Australian polling by phone was only rung to landline numbers. Do you know anybody under the age of 30 that has a landline?
Not very many. See,
there's a big skew in it, isn't it? So.
But there's also that sort of skew that, traditionally, not only that, if you just look at the people who are likely to be home during the day, you've either got unemployed people,
yep,
or you have got retired people.
Yeah, by and large, yeah.
So you're not going to get a cross-section of the community like that. In saying that, is polling worth getting rid of? Absolutely not.
No, we do it too often.
Absolutely not.
I think I don't think you can have an accurate poll. I think I look at Newspoll as an example. You know, it comes out every fortnight now. That's rubbish. You know, how do you? The government, it just forces a government to work poll to poll, whereas when it used to come out quarterly or at least every 2 months or bi-monthly or whatever, at least it gave the government a chance to go, okay, the polling was a bit bad, but then they can govern. You know, now they're always looking at the next poll because it's a week away.
Yeah, it does give them more time to implement. However, as a society, I believe that we've become a lot more short attention span.
Oh yeah.
And if you're going to get anything useful out of polls, they need to be more frequent than they used to be. Anyway, let's move on.
Yes.
From one person who has previously defected from a party.
Yep.
To another one, we've got
Yay.
Mark Latham, who's joining the Liberal Democrat Party.
Wow. Wow.
I never truly... I can't say that I saw it coming.
I don't think there's anyone in Australia outside Mark Latham and his wife that would have seen that coming. Maybe David Layholm, you know.
I think David Layholm sees a lot of people going his way when they're not always going to.
Well, possibly, yeah.
I think he's got a bigger view of what he and his party are than most other people do.
Well, what they are is one seat out of 76, so 75. How many seats do we have in the Senate? 76.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
However,
anyway,
so what Mark Latham has basically said is that he's returning to politics to play a role for fighting in our national values. End quote. He's also said that he supports 80 to 90% of the Liberal Democrat platform.
Yep.
Which he believes is pretty good for someone with strong views formed over a long period of time.
Yep, fine, yeah.
He's described them as the party of freedom, which allowed room for dissent and diversity of opinion.
Yep.
Claiming, and here's another quote from him, Shorten Labour is only interested in diversity of skin colour, gender and sexualities. Safe schools BS, end quote.
Yep, can't argue with him there. The Labour Party used to be inclusive of different persuasions of politics, but they're only inclusive now if you agree with them. So, we had the Western Australia, was it Joe Ludwig in Western Australia quit because he opposed legislating same-sex marriage? The party are forcing their members now to vote for it, just as an example, whether you agree with that or not. But, that's the Labour Party for you. I don't think anything of the shortened Labour Party, so I can't fault. Let's be honest though. Has Mark Latham been happy with the Labour Party even when he was in it?
Probably not. He never really seemed to. He never really seemed to be happy there, and he always came across to me like he was trying to push what he thought the Labour Party should be, and the rest of the Labour Party under him were thumbing their noses to a lot of those concepts.
Well, it was Kevin Rudd in the background there, thumbing his nose, undermining him when he was there, undermining Latham when he was there. I mean, that's what Latham believes. If you read his Latham diaries, he says that him and Conroy and Wayne Swan were always there sort of undermining, leaking to the press and all that sort of stuff, which, it's only one person's opinion, but when you base it on the fact that that's exactly what Rudd did to Gillard, so...
Yeah.
I have to think there's a bit of probably some truth in that. So I don't know. Mark Latham's a strange one. When he ran against Johnny Howard in 2004, I thought, oh, this guy's a thug. I just didn't like him. Nothing that came out of his mouth seemed intelligent, except for his concept. He did actually. I clearly remember he had a concept called social capital, which he wanted to reinvest social capital in the sort of, I guess, the blue-collar suburbs for him, Sydney, but, I guess around the country. So that was an interesting idea. But I didn't, I don't know, I didn't like him then, but then he left and he was doing his commentary and stuff, and he seems to me to, over the last 10 years, to have evolved his views to a more conservative angle than they used to be, or at least middle of the road. I don't know. It's interesting. It's a coup for the Lib Dems, maybe. I don't know. Is Mark Latham is that a coup? Is that?
I think it's a coup in that he has maybe not as much as he used to, but he still has name recognition.
That's very true. It's very much more name recognition,
and
especially with taxi drivers outside McDonald's.
Wow. Anyway, he I think it gives them a party that doesn't have a real face to them.
That's true, yes.
It gives them a face, and that people will recognise to an extent. I think especially considering, he's basically had a string of really controversial remarks when he was on Sky News, and the last one, the one that got him fired was suggesting that a high school student was gay because he was involved with a feminist video. Mm-hmm. And that's the one that got him fired. But he had a lot of very, very free speech views previous to that.
Do you find there's a bit of hypocrisy on the part of Sky News in firing him for expressing a non-politically correct opinion when that's what they employed him for?
That's a good question.
That's what you expect from Mark Latham. That's what he's there for. And, he says something that, maybe it went too far.
You can have politically incorrect opinions, and you can express them.
Well,
but when you're on
television, you're not allowed to anymore.
When you're on television, you can't. There's a line of victimization that shouldn't be crossed, and there's a certain line that in this case he wasn't in the case of the high school student in the feminist video, he wasn't victimizing the student by saying he was gay, but he was putting the student in a position where other people from his school may take that and bully him for it.
Mm-hmm. So Latham's responsible for the actions of others?
No, but he is certainly responsible for giving them ammunition.
Fair enough. So I'm just playing devil's advocate there. It's just
no. I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I've always found his opinions ran along similar lines to, say, Andrew Bolt.
Yep.
And which is very interesting because that's all dovetailed quite nicely there, because he's now going on the Bolt report and discussing the decision.
Yep.
And talking about and discussing his views on Bill Shorten's Labor.
Yeah, well.
So that's going to be, if you're a conservative and you're really into that being all fired up about it, you're going to get everything you want out of that. I am very sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
In saying that, personally, I am very much against a lot of Andrew Bolt, what he has to say, because I find him a great factor in building the divisiveness of this country, and very much one of those people who is to blame for creating a culture where we can't listen to other people's ideas politically, and we just attack and he's certainly not the only person here, that's helped build this, but he's helped contribute to a culture where we attack the person and not the argument, where we say things like fascist, where we say things like libtard, where we say your opinion shouldn't be listened to because you're a conservative or because you're a greenie.
Mm.
And as I've said since day dot of this podcast, to me that's one of the biggest threats that we face as a country right now, because we're steps on the road to where America is right now, and that is not a place that is good.
I find it interesting that you say that about Bolt. I'm not going to agree or disagree with you, except that I disagree. But I sorry, I couldn't help that.
I know.
Yeah, look, I find it interesting that you say that about Bolt, because I think it's very much, we're on different sides of the political spectrum, and we both think the same thing but blame the other side for it.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not purely placing the blame on Bolts, on Stan Zemanek, on laws, on all of that. Like,
yeah.
I'm not saying this is a conservative segment of society's fault.
No, I know. I just mean that's interesting that we both see it. We both see it coming from the other side. I think it mostly comes from the left. I'll be honest with you.
I see it comes from both sides.
Yeah, and I hate it. I hate that you can't have a conversation. A prime example in the other direction is that when the Attorney General George Brandis came out, I don't know, it might have even been a couple of years ago now, and said, people have the right to be a bigot. And I thought, well, you know what? He's actually correct. People should have that right to hold an opinion, but it's just. But he was howled down by every section of the left media for expressing that. But then you hear the same thing from the left media about someone of theirs that's shut down by, as you said, someone like Bolt or Alan Jones or someone like that. So it's one of those situations I think everyone needs to step back and go, hey, we actually all agree. Let's just stop arguing with each other. We actually all agree pretty much across the board here. Let's actually do something about it. Or just get on with life. Stop being precious snowflakes.
See, I think...
I hate that expression. I can't believe I just used it.
I'm with you on that one. I don't like that expression.
Yeah.
I think in the Brandis case, it's like, yes, do people have the right to be a bigot? Well, yeah, they do. But they don't have a right to have their bigotry impact on society. Like, you can't hire or fire if you're a business owner.
No, based on those things.
Based on your personal bigotry. You can't discriminate. People who. But
they're all different
who are customers.
points. This is the part that I didn't like about the argument when he was howled down about it. Was his point was that it was all about Racial Discrimination Act and all that sort of rot again, and talking about the word offence in there, and how do you define the word offence? Being offended shouldn't be a legal problem. I'm offended by a hell of a lot of stuff I see out there. People could be offended by things we say in this, in our podcasts, in this podcast.
I'm sure people are. For the 3 people who are listening.
Yeah, that's right. And, the 2 that agree with me, and, I don't like, then that we get, no, you can't, discriminate against people based on their, sex or skin or anything like that. But, and, I mean, there's no but to that. But just offending someone, Bolt's whole thing about, those articles he wrote, which was where his whole thing comes from, he said some stuff which was offensive, but it wasn't discriminatory. It didn't affect that person other than cause offence.
I think,
in his view, in his opinion,
I think at the time though, the Brandis, people have the right to be a bigot quote was tied in with potential changes to the Racial Discrimination Act, and the way just in the way that it was put, just whether it was the case or not, this is how the public perceived it. So you've got truth by public opinion.
Yeah, well, basically. I'll go a step further with that.
And everyone saw it because that was coming in with a potential reworking of the Racial Discrimination Act. People saw it as, we're afraid that the Liberal Party right now is going to make it legal to discriminate in a workplace setting, and people were justifiably, I personally believe justifiably, afraid of that, because that's something that if anyone's going to touch, you should be afraid of.
Well, no, I disagree, because the point is, I think, okay, yes, the Australian people were justifiably afraid of what Brandis and Abbott were going to do with the Racial Discrimination Act, but I think they were afraid because the media, and this goes back to our old bugbear about the media, were jumping up and down saying, Brandis can't say that, what a stupid thing to say, blah, 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 he's just categorically wrong, etc., etc. When he wasn't categorically wrong, he said it in a nuanced way and explained where he was coming from, and that he didn't actually hold the view of those people or anything like that. All he wanted to do was change one word in the Act because he thought that word could be used to file frivolous lawsuits, which we've seen time and again, which it has. So I actually think, again, the media is to blame for that particular situation.
Interestingly enough, that I do agree with you there, and I see it having come from both sides of the media.
Yeah, because maybe it has.
You did see the conservative media also jumped straight onto the quote of "people have a right to be a bigot" and did not put any of the nuance in either.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yep, that's very true.
Because that's what sold to their, to a certain percentage of their listener base.
Yeah,
and that's what sold to the people who already hated them. So this will get all the greenies fired up and make them listen.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And you are correct. It happened on both sides. Anyway,
we got off track of Mark Latham there a bit.
No, that's okay. speaking of media and political correctness and all of that, our last topic for today is I wanted to quickly touch on the ALP, the Labor Party's video that is at the centre of the racism accusations at the moment. You know, the one that's basically, it's taken aim at the government's policy on temporary work visas, and its tagline is "Employ Australians First," while pretty much showing only white Australians in it. You know, a lot of Labor MPs, including Anthony Albanese, have basically said it's a shocker, you know, it should never have been produced, you know, and it should never have been shown. It's not the sort of ad that they want their party to be promoting and all of that. And questions are being asked about who approved it.
Well, you have to think Bill Shorten approved it because he's in it. Are people in anything?
You'd think so.
Are people in anything that they haven't approved themselves or at least had a look at? And if the answer's yes, they are, then I think that's a flaw in leadership.
Well, it's very interesting that this is the same person who is being accused of, by Mark Latham and so many others, that he only cares about things, about diversity, if it's racial, diversity in that sense.
Mm.
Yet, here he is, here he saw himself in an ad and didn't notice the lack of diversity in it.
Yeah. Is he... look. I was going to give a nuanced answer to this, but let's be perfectly honest. I'm going to be very blunt here. Bill Shorten is nothing but an opportunist. He has just seen an opportunity to swing a couple of votes based on something that the Turnbull government is doing. It's all he does. There's nothing original or interesting about Bill Shorten. He is the single worst opposition leader this country has ever seen. I just think he is just completely and totally hopeless. Even Mark Latham, as an opposition leader, was better than... How, when we've got such an inept Liberal government in, that people genuinely don't like, is Labor still even keel or only just slightly ahead in the polling? How is Bill Shorten himself still not the preferred Prime Minister to Malcolm Turnbull?
Because he is Hillary Clinton.
He's going the way of Hillary Clinton, isn't he?
Insofar, he is Hillary Clinton insofar that you have, in the US election, we had Trump, who was very, very, even in the election, and he won the election on being unpopular.
Oh, yeah.
But then you had the other party's leader was just somebody so incredibly unlikable that how are they going to get anywhere? And the truth is, Bill Shorten is incredibly unlikable.
He just doesn't cut across to the... He doesn't cut through to the public, does he? You know, he's either... I don't know what the problem... Look,
you know why he's there.
Labor would win with Albanese. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely. And you know why Bill Shorten is there. You know why Bill Shorten is still there.
Oh, Kevin Rudd.
It's because...
Kevin Rudd is the reason he's there. Kevin Rudd changed the laws in the party so that they couldn't dismiss a leader easily.
Even then, the party itself is too afraid to dismiss a leader right now, because all that would be is more kindling to the LNP ad campaign of, oh, do you really want these guys in? They change their leader every 16 months.
Well, I don't think the Liberals can actually use that anymore.
They'll try.
You know, if
they will try.
Yeah, look, if Turnbull lasts until the next election, which I think he will.
He will.
And Shorten doesn't, which I don't think he will. I think they're going to have some... I think, yes, you're right. The Libs will run those ads. Here we go again. Empire building.
Honestly, what the Labor Party really needs to do right now is bite the bullet and get rid of Shorten now. Because you have got
2 years out. Yes.
2 years. 2 years to show that this next person can be a good leader.
People don't care about leadership changes in the opposition. That's the other point.
Exactly.
It's only the opposition. We don't really care about them at all. So, on back to this ad, I think it was a blooper, but whether... Oh, look. Did it make it to air? It was only for the internet, wasn't it?
I believe it was only for the internet. However, to me, I don't think it was a blooper.
No?
I think this was a very subtle call out to people in regional Queensland and in Western Australia who might have potentially been considering switching to One Nation.
Oh, okay.
This is, for my money, I believe, with employ Australians first and then showing nothing but white people, this is basically Labor trying to give at least some sort of subtle nod to all of the people who are very anti-immigration but don't want to go to the LNP. You know, these are the people who will potentially vote One Nation, who will vote Katter Party, who will vote that particular way. And I think this is a sort of ad that I believe was targeted towards regional areas where they're afraid of losing voters to One Nation.
Fair enough.
And
that's an interesting idea. I can't say I disagree with that.
I don't think it's going to work because, you know, I don't really think you can. How was it? I mean, what was it that Arthur Sinodinos said about it? It's like you can't narrowcast in this business. You know, you can't have one message for regional Queensland and another message for, you know, inner capital city. He said something to that effect, and he's right.
Yeah.
You know, you can't. This is the information age. This is the internet age. This is the age of social media.
Yep.
You can't push even a subtle difference like that between say, you know, the electorate of Dawson and one of the electorates in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's right.
Because people are going to see it regardless of whether you think they will or won't. People are going to see it. Gone are the days. Like, you used to be able to do that before the internet was such a big thing, before Facebook and Twitter were so big. You used to be able to run a different ad on the regional TV stations than you did in Brisbane.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And for my money, I really think that this was a ham-fisted attempt to try and target potential One Nation voters.
Yeah, okay. Look, look, why not? Makes sense to me. So, whatever the case, it's not worked. So it's all it's done's upset people. So
it's blown up in their face, and
I mean, personally, I think it's a bit of a storm in a teacup. But you know, it's again, we're back to what we always say, isn't it? Perception. Politics is perception.
Absolutely, and even these days, storm in a teacups you can't write them off for being storm in a teacups anymore because this is the 24-hour news cycle.
Yep.
And people they might not remember exactly why they have a bad taste about someone, but they'll remember that they had a bad taste about someone.
You know
and
what?
That's harder to change than anything else.
If it keeps going on and on and on and on, it keeps popping up in their news feed on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. That it keeps bringing it into their mind. You know, it
Absolutely.
keeps refreshing that negative opinion, that reinforcing that negative opinion all the time. So,
absolutely, and you know, as anybody who works in any form of public, you know, with the public in any way, whether it be it media, be it retail, be it whatever, everyone knows that it is a lot easier to lose a positive opinion than it is a negative opinion. I mean, like take Bill Cosby as an example right there. Mm-hmm. Everybody he was beloved for decades. And no one's ever going to be loving him again he is always going to be a heel to society now.
Yeah.
Rolf Harris,
Yeah, well,
same deal. You know, look at Ike Turner.
Yep.
Who is who is one of the greatest songwriters and musicians of all time. He's the man who invented distortion for the guitar as well. There's a little bit of music trivia for you.
Yep.
People to this day revile the man. Yet, for some reason, and I don't know how, Chris Brown seems to still be loved.
Yeah. Who knows? It's a strange world that I can't figure out. But that's good, because it gives us things to talk about on our podcast.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, we should probably wrap it up right now.
Yep.
So we still have more things to discuss for the next episode, which we will.
We have always got plenty of things to discuss. So.
Oh, thank you, 24-hour news cycle.
Well, you know, I'd thought about touching on, you know, the drug scandal in rugby league again, because that's huge
actually
story.
Something I would like to discuss in a future episode.
Cool.
Because right now the NRL is in desperate need of a clean-up.
It's crazy, isn't it? Well, you know what? Let's talk about that next episode. There you go, viewers. Listeners, a sneak peek of our next episode.
Awesome. So, yet again, for everybody, this is the first time that you've joined us. Thank you so much for listening, for giving us your time. We really appreciate it. And if it's not your first time, if you've listened to us before and you're back for more, well, we want you to know that we appreciate it as well. It is so important to us. And if you want to talk to us, if you want to have discussions, you can find us on Twitter at AustrAlien Pod. That's alien spelt like the things coming from the sky, maybe one day if they actually exist, who knows. And you can find us at the AustrAlien Podcast on Facebook as well.
Yep.
Please give us a like, give us a subscribe. If you could do us a favour, jump on that iTunes and give us a review. That would mean the world to us, because that's how we actually get discovered by more people.
Absolutely.
Or if you want to just take one friend and sit them down, send them a copy of this episode and say, hey, you should check these guys out. That would mean the world to us, you know. We really want to grow this. We want to get this as big as we can, as we've spoken about in the past. I'm TJ Hollis. I am signing off.
And I'm Sean Mills, and we will see you next time.
And thank you very much for listening.